bucka. Ha. You know the deal.
The next thing we're going to talk about in algebra is a topic called like terms. And to start, we're going to explore the type of question we've seen already. So here you're asked to simplify 5x plus 4x if x equals 8. So as we've already seen, if we know the value of the variable and we're given a math sentence that we have to simplify, usually the first step is you substitute the value of that variable into the math sentence and then solve. So we know that x is equal to 8, so 5x means 5 times x, so that means 5 times 8 plus 4 times 8. So following order of operations, we have to do the multiplication first. 5 times 8 is 40. 4 times 8 is 32, so we get 40 plus 32, which is 72. Now, if we look back at the original math sentence that we have here, 5x plus 4x, you'll notice that the variables are exactly the same. Both of those terms have an x in them. And so another way to look at this is, well, we're adding 5x's plus 4x's. And if we add 5x's plus 4x's, altogether we would have 9x's. Now, if we take our value of x and substitute that into our expression here, we get now 9 times 8, which is 72. So we do get the same answer. But what you can see here is you're actually able to simplify this math sentence before you substitute in the value of the variable, because these two terms here are called like terms. And we're going to talk about why they're called like terms next. So going back to the original math sentence that we had there, 5x plus 4x, I mentioned the word term. So we have to come up with a little definition for a term in math. And a term is either a number, a variable, or a number and a variable, or variables multiplied together. So in this math sentence here, we actually have two terms. Here we have a number and a variable multiplied together, and another number and variable multiplied together. And it just so happens that we have the same variable there. Another phrase that often comes up when we're talking about like terms is the coefficient. And the coefficient is the number that the variable is being multiplied by. So for example, here x is being multiplied by 5. So the coefficient there is 5. Here x is being multiplied by 4. So the coefficient there is 4. So now that we know what a term is and what a coefficient is, we can talk about what like terms are. And like terms are terms that use exactly the same variable. So again, going back to this example here, these are like terms because the variable being used in each one of these terms is x. It's possible you could have more than one variable in a term, and we'll see a couple of examples like that. But right now, so far, we've just seen an example with one variable, x. And one final thing to note here, as we also saw with the example that we looked at, like terms can be added or subtracted. So going back to the original question that we started with here, we have 5x plus 4x. Those are like terms because the variable is exactly the same on both terms. So we can simplify that. When we simplify that, we add those together, it equals 9x. And as we saw with that example, when x was equal to 8, whether we substituted into this math sentence, 5x plus 4x, or into this math sentence, 9x, in both cases we got 72. So there we can see that these two math sentences are equivalent. They are exactly the same. 5x plus 4x is the same as 9x. So here's another example of a math sentence where we have a couple of terms. Our first term here is 7y, and our second term is 4y. And what we're doing is we're being asked to subtract these terms. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, are these like terms? And if they are like terms, they have exactly the same letter. And in fact, they are like terms because the first term has a y, the second term has a y. So we can simplify that by subtracting those two terms. And as you saw in the previous example, when we do that, all we're really doing is subtracting the coefficients. So 7 minus 4 is 3, and leaving the variable the same. So the variable is still 3y. Now, let's just confirm this again. Suppose y was equal to 5. If we substitute that into the original equation, we get 7 times 5 minus 4 times 5. 7 times 5 is 35. 4 times 5 is 20. And 35 minus 20 is 15. Well, if I take that same value for y and substitute it into this expression, 3y, that means 3 times y, so 3 times 5 in this case, and 3 times 5 is 15. So we do get the same answer. So we can say that 7y minus 4y is the same as 3y. And we were able to subtract those two terms because they're like terms. And they're like terms because they use exactly the same variable. So for this next example, again, we're being asked to simplify, and we've got a couple of terms here that involve some variables. So again, the first question we're going to ask ourselves is, do we have any like terms here? Well, if we look at the first term here, the variable there is an x. And the second term there, the variable is a y. Those are different variables, so what we have to assume is those are different values. They're usually not going to be the same. So in this case, there is really nothing we can do. You cannot simplify this math sentence because we do not have like terms. So here's another example where we've got a few terms and we're asked to simplify. So if we look at this math sentence, again, the first thing we're going to ask ourselves is, do we have any like terms here? So our first term here is 5x. Now our second term is 3y. That is not a like term, but minus 2x is a like term. So when you have a long math sentence like this with different variables in it, the first thing I suggest you do is rearrange the question so that the like terms are together. So 5x and minus 2x are like terms, so we can put those next to each other. And I like to cross them out as I rearrange just to make sure I don't forget any. Next we have plus 3y and minus 8y. And those are like terms, so again, we can put those together. You'll notice that the operation is staying the same. So because we had plus 3y, I have to keep it as plus 3y. Because we had minus 8y, I have to keep it as minus 8y. So here we've got a couple of pairs of like terms, so we can simplify 5x minus 2x. We subtract the coefficients, we get 3. The variable stays exactly the same. And we can also simplify plus 3y minus 8y. Now here's where we get into a little bit of work with integers. And if we add 3 and subtract 8, altogether we're subtracting 5, or positive 3 minus 8 is minus 5. And once again, the variable stays the same. Well, now what we're left with is a math sentence that does not have any more like terms. So that's where we have to stop. We're not able to simplify that any further. So to finish off our lesson on like terms, I'm just going to ask you to answer a few questions here. So for each one of these questions, you're asked to simplify if it's possible. So again, if we have like terms there, you're going to combine the like terms by adding or subtracting the coefficients and leaving the variable or variables exactly the same. With question number 3, I might suggest you rearrange the question so that the like terms are next to each other. Just be very careful to make sure that you leave the operations attached to the terms. So, for example, here we have minus 3L. That always has to be minus 3L. And when you move minus 7L, it always has to be minus 7L. If you're able to answer those questions, congratulations. You now have a firm understanding of like terms.